Bam. Bam, bada, bam.
Go.
Go. Go.
Woo! Welcome to Filabot Live.
Live.
In this segment, we're going over, I have to look at my notes, incorporating 3D printing into a business.
You forgot what we're doing already?
Yeah.
Man.
I want to
Because
feel
we do
official
so much.
by looking at them.
That was
We
the
could have been like,
least
paper shuffle,
natural
shuffle,
intro
shuffle.
I could possibly come up with. It was great. Continue.
Okay. So, I have a very different angle than what you're going to take on this.
Probably.
You know,
Usually.
usually, mostly all the time. We have some props here, and we're going to go over a few, but what this is about is how do you, or why should you incorporate 3D printing into your business? You know, we've done a lot of prototyping, and we've also done the production, and we're going to run through those two topics in this video, and see if something good comes out of it.
Sure. I think there are a lot of really obvious cases where you would have a 3D printer and maybe some other equipment. Obviously, we're going to talk about how Filabot equipment relates to this kind of overall concept of 3D printing and why
Right.
it's beneficial to have those machines. But I think people forget a lot of the use cases that can come up. Now, obviously, if you're in some kind of manufacturing shop, if you design machines, you know, you would likely have a 3D printer, maybe even more than one, alongside the rest of your equipment, you know,
Plethora of prototyping
saws
tools.
and lathes and maybe laser plasma cutters, things like that. And obviously a 3D printer
Right.
would fit into that. But then you've got a lot of other businesses that would really have none of that equipment that very well could have a 3D printer and make use for it
without all the
constantly.
other
It's
tools.
a mindset.
Right.
The idea that you can very quickly go from concept to thing
Within hours.
really within hours. And even if it's a cheap part, sometimes the time. How often do people buy something for $5, $10, $20 online and spend 3, 4, 5 times as much to have it shipped very quickly?
Right.
When you could print it yourself in half a day, or even, let's say it's Friday at noon and you're not getting that part until Monday, no matter what. Well, you could have it by the end of the day on Friday and
Yeah.
probably spend
Could
less
print
money on the part.
That's
than buying it.
actually, you know, now that you bring that up, and one of the parts we have on the table is our spool holder, which goes on our Filabot spooler, is we've had customers break these tines.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a 3D printed part, and even an injection molded part like that would break.
Right.
But we're able to send the STL file of this to our customers. They're able to print it right there. And yeah, this part probably takes 2 to 3 hours. Well, these settings are a lot more. This is probably like 4 to 5.
Right.
But the customer is able to print it right there, have the replacement part, and we're good to go. It's up and running again, right?
Right.
And that is like an amazing piece that we really like about 3D printing. The other piece I want to bring up about this is that we 3D print this piece so that users know that they can 3D print it for the spools that they use on our spooler. We don't, the spool that you put filament on shouldn't be locked down, and that's why this is 3D printed so you can customize your own. I mean, we're all about not locking things down, so that's why we have this piece. So that was a dive, actually, in
Alright.
both in like prototyping and production, right?
Yeah.
We 3D print and use parts, and that's what these parts are here, except for the GoPro mount. All these parts go into a Filabot product. Filabot spooler. Get rid of that thing. We'll recycle it. No, that's good. Maybe that'll be a
We'll
Filabot
talk
product.
about that in a minute.
We have Filabot fan ducts, so this was an upgrade we did on our Filabot EX2. We got longer running time, and these are 3D printed parts. And that was the beautiful thing, is we were able to prototype this with a 3D printer, and then we were able to produce it with the same 3D printer, right? Kevin was able to optimize the files and get it like perfect. You should see the code that he did. It was like, these are single line prints, it prints it.
Nice.
Oh, amazing.
Nice.
Shout out to Kevin on that one.
Bam.
Yeah, so production of 3D. Oh, let's keep going. Sorry. Okay, and then this is another a new prototype we're working on, but we will be going to production using 3D printing for that.
Right.
So prototyping and production. Once you get into production of 3D printing, if you're over like 5,000 to 10,000 pieces, that's when you should really look at the injection molding side, or at least that's what I think. That's the level. you
Yeah,
get
depending
to.
on what you're doing, there's certainly an economic
Yeah.
factor. You know, if you want to, I want to make 9 of these. That's probably not where you're going to a factory and having molds created
Right.
and having an injection mold process. You can knock that out on even a simple, well, depending on the complexity of the part, you can knock
Right.
that out on a 3D printer.
Single material.
Most likely, far more affordably and far faster.
Right. So yeah, those are like production. We love it. We use it in-house for production, and then we use it, we use it for prototyping as well. So those are the 2 areas that's kind of outside of Filabot. I mean, we haven't even talked about what we bring with our hardware,
Right.
which will be another piece we'll get into.
Right. I'd kind of like people to start to look at 3D printers in the way that we looked at paper printers 30 years ago, maybe even 35 or 40 years ago.
I was not alive then.
No, you weren't, and I was barely alive. I wasn't thinking about printing. But if we start to think back then, if people wanted to move paper around, if they wanted to move documents, you were using a fax, you were using a copier, and if the other person didn't have a fax, it would take, a courier or the mail or something like that to shift those documents around.
That makes, yeah.
And what we're starting to see now is, something like Amazon, just this breadth of online shopping, that to me is kind of the fax machine piece of the revolution. All right, so now all of a sudden we can quickly get stuff from A to B, whereas before it took a lot longer, shipping times,
Right.
finding the thing, whatever it was. But then when paper printing became economical and readily available, all of a sudden we had a lot of things shift. And you would send a digital file to someone and they would just print it out.
Yeah.
And if we take out, if we make the exception of things that had to be signed or notarized or whatever, it was done.
I mean, you can notarize online, I believe, now.
Not an area I'm familiar with, so
Me
I'm not
neither.
gonna. Okay, so.
But I will. Extract.
But if we fast forward 5, 10 years, the ability to send someone files,
And
right?
have them make
There
it.
are plenty of times online where maybe you buy a digital paper print thing, like
Like a PDF or a white paper.
Right,
Or,
it could be some kind of a report. I mean, there's a lot of that information that is being shared, and it's not the paper that's valuable in the same way we would have valued a book
Right.
in the past. It's the data, it's the information. And we're starting to get there with this kind of stuff.
yeah, I think that whole, I mean, we have Thingiverse. Thingiverse has started I believe you can pay, I'll have to look that up. You can contribute to the person on Thingiverse. We have paid, you have GradCAD, which is another file library where you can go and download these objects for modeling or for 3D printing. Really, if you have a model, you can 3D print it.
Right.
And I think as 3D printers improve, like what you just explained is going to be a huge piece to really what makes 3D printing, powerful. I mean, we're able to when we look at machining, you send design documents for the metal part to the machine shop, they machine.
Yeah.
But now we're able to actually we're able to send this file to our end use customers, and there's no middleman. There's no
Right.
middle factory if they have to replace this part.
Right.
I mean, that is
It's mind-blowing.
What?
Now, the reason that I bring that up, the reason that I think this is relevant is, one of the things that you and I first connected over was business and entrepreneurship. And, there's a book that I read that I've talked about. I don't think you've
The
read it yet.
Dry-
No, From Good to Great by Jim
read that
Collins. Did you?
I have not.
You have not, okay. So one of the things in there, and just I'm not even gonna summarize the book, but one of the points in there is that businesses that go far, and because today's topic is about bringing 3D printing into your business, so this is relevant. Businesses that had this kind of great launch, that moved from kind of mediocrity to greatness, and the book gets into all of this. One of the things that they
I think you just
tend to
summarized it.
have, I could go deep. It's one of my favorite books. One of the things that they all have in common is leveraging proper technology at the right time. And being a first mover in most of the time, using 3D printing to do whatever, in whatever your business is, unless you're being silly about it or blowing too much money on it, is going to give you a leg up on your your competition.
Right. I mean, you're with what we've explained with sending this part file, you're just cutting the supply chain in half again, and just
Right.
It's amazing.
And whether you look at that, if we continue to beat this example into the ground.
Oh, we are.
If you look at this as an example of, let's say we iterate it and then we make the file available. I mean, we didn't really have to with this.
This is actually the 10th version.
Okay.
So we could like release that, right? And only have to release and think about like how software is developed. And this is something I've always been interested in, or have becoming more interested, is like software on, what is it, GitHub? Has like the strings that pull and people work on it and push it
Sure.
back up and all that.
Sure.
Being able to do that with hardware has been really hard. It's always been, it's been hardware. It's been, you design and build the product, you send it to production with a huge volume, you can't really make it customizable,
Right.
and then you're asking the user to adapt that to how they work and how they function. And I think as 3D printing gets better, as this additive manufacturing becomes more of a production tool and more people have access to it, it's going to do, yeah, wow, this is exciting.
Right. So this is where I see 3D printing going. So hopefully by this point, we've convinced you that there's opportunity there. Whether your business is production or prototyping or some kind of mix of both,
Right.
there is likely a way that you could leverage 3D printing in some way, on some scale, to make your business either more resilient or more profitable or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking over at the power cord, and it's like, I think we're okay. Questionable power cord.
You might want to look at where the orange cord and the white cord connect. He's
It might
seeing
be
the
okay.
gap.
Okay, anyway, so
We've convinced them.
we've convinced them,
At
maybe.
this point,
Has
they
anyone
see-
convinced over there? No one.
No, that's because we're doing a great job. So
Wow.
let's talk about how and why Filabot equipment
Right, so that's
is
that next,
relevant.
that's that next level, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have, so this piece we used to print in-house. We used to print these in-house. I mean, this was like recently, last week, we stopped printing these in-house. And we have a local 3D printing farm, a bunch of 3D printers, really cool. You walk in the shop and like, everything is buzzing. And if you've seen a 3D printer, you know how you stand in front of it and your eyes
they're
like,
fascinating.
yeah, if it has a heated bed, your eyes kind of dry out. So,
We actually just dropped it. We'll do more if people watch it, but put up a small video
oh, the
just
print.
today of the inside of a 3D printer while it's printing.
S5. It's been out for a while, but I think that's cool. It's cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, they 3D print with that.
Right.
They have a Filabot system to make filament for them, right? So they're using common materials, PLA, and they're feeding their printers with it. But with that, they're able to make custom colors. So if they have a color that they like in the world, they can match it. They're able to take that color, go purchase the color, run it through our systems, and they're not relying on filament that is on Amazon or other suppliers where you're set in that color with those material properties.
Right.
And that's a perfect segue into the material properties.
Right, and just to
Okay,
touch on that just
yeah.
a little bit deeper, it's the same idea as you have the 3D printer, and it means you don't have to wait. It means you have
Right.
more control over the things that are present at that moment. It reduces the time from idea to thing happening. And in having a Filabot system, it's the same thing, but now we're talking at an even lower level. We're talking at a material level.
Right. I mean, that's once we get the recycling suite fully done from start to finish, when his prints fail, being able to throw that back in and like not have that material waste.
Right.
So, I mean, we've picked up garbage bags of waste from him, and it's just like sitting and we can. I mean, we can turn that.
We're almost there. But even now, customization of color. We've started doing some experimentation with blends. We know there are other people out there blending properties, adding things in, glow in the dark. I mean, all kinds of stuff like
we've
that.
had so many videos where we talk about the different, like the list of material grades that just keep running and different
Right.
mixtures and the crazy. But that's the other piece that is so important with our Filabot systems is we have a few materials here that are not common grade materials. I mean, this is a DuPont Teflon PFA 440 HP. I don't know what all that means. There's a data sheet if we want to get into it. But this material is not in filament form. It's not like Amazon isn't selling this. They're not selling the wax over here, right? And they're definitely not selling this Covestro macro blend material. So that's the beauty of our systems, is that we have all these materials, we don't have them in filament form. You're able to take small batches of these materials and make the filament and then 3D print.
Right. It's certainly not a stretch. If you've, at this point, if you've wrapped your brain around, yeah, my business could utilize 3D printing for something. It's not a stretch to say that having certain filaments to do certain things, whatever those things are, would give you even better results. You know, the knowledge that, hey, you know, this printer that we're going to be printing on works best with filament that is this dimension, yada, yada, yada. I mean, there's a lot of variables in there, and if you're willing to make the investment in time and in resources, assuming that you do it intelligently, it's going to lead to benefits on the other side.
Right. Oh, this was another beautiful piece. We had a customer who recently did a extrusion test, or they had a system. We've had a few customers that do this. They have our systems, they make filament, they 3D print their part, so they 3D print what they're going to injection mold because they're in injection molding volumes.
Sure.
And they're able to really test that form, fit, and function, and material grade. I mean, that's the function, right? They're able to see how the material that they're going to be injection molding this part is going to perform. And that, being able to do that close, and that, you know, without having to invest in a whole mold, is amazing. I mean, a mold costs upwards of $10,000, the time involved.
Anybody that's done any outsourced prototyping knows, yes, this is a game changer. And if you are involved in prototyping, I would be shocked if you don't have some kind of 3D printer.
I mean, this video in a way is kind of behind the 8 ball, if I'm going to be honest, with where, if you're watching this video and don't have a 3D printer for prototyping, I mean, 3D printers are so cheap, right?
They're pretty cheap.
They're down into the $250 range. Just get one and start playing around with it. And then you can expand with that. But if you're not in that already, you're kind of, I think you're behind the 8 ball.
Most likely.
Yeah.
Your competition has them.
Oh, yeah. They're printing shoes.
Let's not talk about the printed shoes.
Well, the other ones. The ones that
The
are
other ones?
being
The ones that
printed.
aren't in stock?
No, the ones that are. Cost $1,000.
Oh, what?
Anyway. 3D printing is extensive. It's amazing. I mean, it is amazing. It's a field.
Okay, so if we think about the printer as the final piece before making a thing, and we think about the Filabot equipment as generating the ideal material to go into the printer, the only limitation in that equation is what you have for materials. And cliche as it may be, your imagination.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, with our systems, you're able to own the whole lineup. You're able to own the means of production of filament, recycling, your ideas. You're able to not
It's all there.
recycle your ideas, but
You got
you're
it.
able to. Yeah.
It's all there. You can iterate your ideas.
I'm gonna buy one now.
Go buy a Filabot
Yeah.
from Filabot.com. Woo! Do you get a coupon code for yourself?
No,
Lame.
I know. I don't have a 3D printer at home yet. I have, but okay.
I don't know that there's much else to say. I mean, the goal today was to
Connect.
convince people, if they're not convinced, that they should have 3D printer, and that in many cases, making your own filament makes sense. Have we had anyone ring in that wants to talk? No? Okay. Well, that's cool. We're just going to assume that we did that great of a job then. We do these videos every Thursday, starting just after 3 p.m. Eastern.
Sometimes sooner to make up for the.
Do we though? No.
It'll be on.
It's all right. You start watching at 3 and you're gonna see the whole thing, because we usually start a couple minutes late. It just happens.
Last week we had fireworks. Or the week before.
If you're watching and you wonder what it's like to work here, and you have an idea and you think, is that really what? It's exactly what it's like to work here. Find us on social. Obviously, if you're watching this, you're probably on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. You can find us at filabot.com. Don't be afraid to write us.
You can call us
Email
too.
us. You can call us, but that's not really our favorite way to talk to people.
But
Because we're
we will.
usually busy. I mean, if you call us, we'll call you back. If you leave a message.
I think we're into the banter.
This is
this
good banter.
video.
This is bantery.
All right,
Banter.
30 seconds on the clock.
You know what was weird when I recorded the video with
Oh,
this?
this was the prototyping piece we could have.
Yeah, we can talk. Well, so this is a skin that I printed for a GoPro session, so we could put the GoPro into the printer and record because the bed's really hot, and so just putting the GoPro right on the bed didn't make sense. So here's a
And we could have stuck
kind
that.
of a thermal buffer layer. When I put this in, it fit just fine. It was a little loose, but after it recorded that little building
Yeah.
printing, the one you can see the video on, it tightened up. Like I had to force the GoPro out. Like it shrunk a little bit
No.
and fit to the unit. It's kind of a cool thing to
Sure,
think about.
What do we? You can do that with bearings and a thermal. What is that called? Thermal fit, expansion fit.
I think it probably annealed
Okay, because it was just sitting with
because I
the.
think the top PLA is one of those PLAs that you can anneal,
Oh,
and that was printed with the Ultimaker top PLA.
it was printed with the Ultimaker
And
top PLA.
it's tough. And the support material.
Yes, that one did happen with the sport material. And is it next week we're gonna do that video that really digs into the Ultimaker tips and tricks? Is that
That was last week.
was last week?
I don't remember.
That's right, because I
That
wasn't
was
here.
last week.
I did watch it, but I don't have the same experience because I wasn't at the desk. You did a good job with that one, Kevin.
Thanks.
It was good to have Kevin on that one.
It was.
He's-
Bye.
Bye.